Hello, beautiful souls. I am Valeria Maritza at Healing Through You. I am an infinite being of light, and so are you. Once in a while, you meet someone out there that is just so connected. This is my next guest. She has had several NEDs. She's a walking. If you don't know what that is, we can go right into that in this episode. And you can find out so much about what it's like to walk the earth with this knowing, with this little bit of light that has been shown to us because of the experiences that we have gone through. So this is my pleasure to bring to you my guest, Esther Alley. She is amazing, and we connected like right away. We were like speaking the same language, vibing at the same frequency, and so I'm so excited to bring her here to you. Welcome, Esther. I am so excited to have you here. How are you?
I am fabulous and I am so excited to be here. It is so good to be amongst my people.
Oh, yes, I feel you. I completely feel you.
Yes, yes.
Let's get started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how your life was before your first NED? For those of you who don't know, Esther has had several of them.
I grew up in a family of 10 people. I'm seven of 10. And my mother raised us as a very close-knit family because my father wasn't no longer in the home. And I grew up in a Pentecostal holiness background. And I always felt out of place. I didn't understand what they were doing. I asked a lot of questions, and I think that was just my nature. I asked a lot of questions that couldn't be answered. I was always in trouble because I was asking questions that a child of my age shouldn't have been asking. And I just always felt out of place. And so when I was old enough, I think I left home when I was 17 because I said there has to be something more in this world than what they're teaching me. It was so restrictive and um so uneasy for me to be. And even though I saw some amazing things happen there, it still did not gel with me. So I left and I went out into the world. And I started working. I didn't even bother to go to college. I graduated. In fact, I graduated the last year in high school. I only had to take 4 classes because I had so many credits.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't even realize that I should have went to it wasn't on my radar. I was just interested in life. I wanted to find out what else was out there outside of what I had been raised in. And so I went out there and eventually my sister that was older than me, we ended up getting apartments together and we're just partying and living for the weekend and enjoying life and working and meeting people and stuff. I had my first child when I was 20, and her father and I were going to get married, and I decided, no, why should I marry him just because I have this child? It didn't
Very
make sense.
progressive.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
progressive thought.
yeah.
Good.
It didn't make sense to me because there were so many things about him that didn't match with me, and so I didn't want to intermingle my life with his and have the child um, pick up some of his habits. They weren't, yeah. At any
Quite
rate,
aware. You were quite aware.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I was quite aware of a lot of things that I didn't understand at that time, but I'm partying and just having a good time. Um, and I got sick. I didn't know what was wrong with me. Every weekend, I'm at the emergency trying to figure out what's wrong. I was losing weight. Um, I didn't have a regular MD, but every woman at that time had to have a gynecologist, right? So I had a gynecologist, but I didn't have a regular MD. But I kept getting sick, and so I kept going to emergency. and they couldn't figure out what it was. And this went on for almost 6 months.
Oh,
And I remember I was so sick. I I I hadn't had a bowel movement in like 2 weeks. And when I did, my bowels were pure white. And I was like, okay, something's really wrong now, right?
yeah.
And so I go back and I tell them this. It's like, it's almost like otherworldly. They should have known what this was. And then one day I got up and I just felt better. I said, I'm gonna go to work, right? But I'm still looking like a skeleton. And I noticed, okay, I'm changing colors because all the insides of my hands were yellow, my eyes were yellow, my mouth, all this was, I'm like, something, but I didn't know what it was. So I go into work. My supervisor sees me. She says, oh no, you got to go home. Go back to your doctor, tell them to give you a test for yellow or hepatitis because something's wrong. And that's what I did. I went right to my gynecologist and said, could you give me a test for hepatitis or yellow? They did. He said, you have hepatitis. He gave me the name of a doctor. He said, go see this doctor. So I go see the doctor. He says, okay, just go home, rest, eat a bland diet, no seasoning. The liver is ill and it has to heal itself. What he didn't realize was that I was in the third stages of that disease.
Other than that, check.
It's the weirdest thing. I'm laying there dying. And slowly, I remember I was in my bedroom and I used to sleep in the dark, right? And I heard this voice call my name, Esther. And I sat up. It scared me so bad. I was like, I won't be sleeping in this room again in the dark. And I got up and I started sleeping on the couch. And my other sister was living with me, but she's still partying. She's like, yeah, the party has to go on, you know.
Yeah,
So
you're sick in the couch.
right. But I had this feeling that I was at the end. I knew that that voice was death. I knew that was from another place. And I had this feeling, so I began to prepare my life. Like, I made sure all my insurances were up to date. My car insurance would be paid. My car would be paid off if once I left. There would be money left for my little girl. I made sure I went and did her. I think this was in the winter. I used to put her summer clothes on layaway. So when summer comes, she'd have summer clothes. I had this system that I had in my mind. So all of that was taken care of. And then I told my sister when I got this feeling, I said, I want to go home. I want to go back to the church and see everybody. And she said, oh, don't worry, this was Saturday. And she's partying, she's high and everything. She said, we'll go, we'll go. And so that Sunday I got up and we went to the church. And everybody's looking at me because I look like death warmed over, okay? And so we get there, and the bishop tells us to stand up, me and my sister. And he starts telling this story about a journey he had been on praying for another woman. He said, and on my way back from this journey of praying for this person, he said, I encountered you, talking about me. And he said, a lamb got in between us, and I knew I couldn't reach you. He said, I've seen your death certificate. I mean, this man prophesied to me. He said, I've seen your death certificate. He said, and when you leave, your sister's going to lose her mind. And of course, the whole church is screaming and hollering. And I'm like, and I'm sitting there like, you telling me something I don't know? That was my attitude. I remember because I knew I was out of here. And then at the end of the service, as everybody was passing and shaking and all, and he checked, he shook my hand. He said, little girl, he said, I have been praying for you. He said, I have sent to the kahunas, because he's a member of the Hawaiian kahuna or something, and the Masanis, he said, and they all sent red flags. He said, but if you want to live, you have to go to God for yourself. And I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? I'm out of here. I'm dead because I don't know nothing about no God, right? And um, and so my mother immediately sent all my brothers, moved me out to her house, just took over my life, right? Which it was gone anyway. But the one thing I remembered, I was laying on her couch and she had a white sheet on the couch. And when I would close my eyes, I would see just pure white. It was just so bright. And I never felt what I was feeling at that moment. Just peace. There was no pain. There was no worry. I've never had that feeling since. And so I'm laying on the couch. And then one day my brother's bamming on the door. We used to call my mother Maydia. Maydia, get up, get up. She comes to her, what's wrong? She said, Bishop said, take her to the hospital. She's laying there dying. She's dying. And I was just going, sleeping away, and my mother just thought I was just sleeping, but I was leaving and I knew it. I mean, I didn't feel attached anymore here. So of course, they all get me in the car and they all, the whole family got to go, everybody's rushing me over to the hospital. And I remember I'm in the examining room and the doctor comes in and examines me. And and then he goes out and he says, he calls for my family who's here with her. And I remember hearing him say to my mom, if you know how to pray, you better pray. He said, because there's nothing we can do for her. Okay. And I'm laying there and I still didn't feel fear. I wasn't afraid. I was like, I already know everybody's telling me what I know, and I'm okay with this. There was a peace about this. But the one thing I think that held me to this side, nothing changed. They put me in the hospital. I was in the hospital about 8 days. Nothing changed in what I felt, nor in my condition. But my mother came every day from the beginning of visiting hours. She got on the bus and rode a bus for 30 miles to be there when visiting hours started. She'd wake me, she'd bathe me, she'd feed me, and she'd sit there all day with me. The other thing that was happening to me was I was dreaming very vividly. It was like my life was being played out. There was a review. Everything that had happened, I saw it through the dreams. And I remember asking my mom about certain things, and she would look at me and she'd say, how could you remember that? You were 5 months old. You were 8 months old. How do you remember these? And I kept telling her, I saw it in a dream. She said, yeah, that happened. And then one night, well, they had scheduled me for a liver biopsy because nothing was changing. Everything was the same. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I don't want that to happen. I don't want them to do this invasive stuff. I don't want them to just leave me alone, right? And I remember that night, I went to bed, I was humming this hymn, this spiritual song. I can't remember to this day. I cannot remember the song, okay? To this day, I can't remember. But it was so peaceful. It just lulled me into sleep, right? The next day, when I awakened, I don't remember anything from the night before. No dream, no nothing. The sun woke me up because it was shining through the windows of my room. And I remember I jumped out of bed and ran to the window. And I looked up, I said, that's what the sun is. It was like I had never seen the sun. I'm looking around the grass. Oh my God, that's what a tree is? That's grass? Oh, wow, I was so excited to see these things. I'd never seen them before. At least that's was my feeling. That's what I felt.
Okay.
I knew intellectually what they were, but I had never seen it before. And then as I began to think, I could remember things, but I didn't even know why I was there. It was like I'm looking in someone else's mind as the memories begin to flow in. They weren't, I didn't have any connection to them. I hadn't experienced it, but I knew it belonged to this body, to me. I knew that it had, you understand? Because I could see myself in it, but this was not, it's like I was reconnecting to this, to the physical, and to what had happened in this physical. But I didn't know why, but I knew I shouldn't be in that hospital. And so I go out and I tell them, look, I need to go. I need to go. I shouldn't be here. And they're like, no, no, Esther, get back in your bed. You're not, what do you mean I'm not, well, I'm not sick. Okay, whatever, I'm healed. I'm not sick. So I'm all excited and making all this noise. And they're like, just calm down, calm down. And so they sent the phlebotomist in to take blood, and he's trying to take blood. And I'm like, look, I'm not, he said, just calm down, calm down. Let me get your blood. We're going to do some tests. I said, whatever you got to do. I am not sick anymore. I want to go home. And all these memories were flooding in my mind. So I knew I was a part of a family. I knew I could see my mom. I could see all of these pieces. And so I asked him, I said, I want to call my mom. And the lady said, okay, you can call her. Here's the payphone, the number, blah, blah, blah. So I called, I said, could you come get me? I'm ready to go. She said, no, you can't come home. I'm on my way. I'm coming, but you can't come home. This is early in the morning, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I was so agitated, they called for the doctor. Okay, it was like this woman had lost her mind. Because I knew I didn't belong there. I was like, why am I
You
here,
had
right?
energy. I mean, from being laying on the bed doing nothing,
Yeah,
like
boom, I'm up. And the doctor comes in and he says, what is going on? You can't go home. You're sick. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Please don't make me stay here. I'm just fussing when he said, listen, listen, just calm down. Calm down. I'm going to make a deal with you. This is what we're going to do. If you can gain 5 pounds, when you gain 5 more pounds and some of the poison, they call it bowel, is backed out of your system, I'm going to let you go home. He came the next day. I had gained the 5 pounds and there was no poison in my system. And the doctor was like, I don't know what the hell is going on here. I don't know what happened. I've never seen this before. I said, I tried to tell you, I want to go home. Let me go home. My mom came and got me that day. I went home. Okay? I went home. But something was different. And not something, everything was different. It was almost a seamless process, but there was just this little something that I knew something was different. I didn't know what it was, you know? And my whole world changed, my whole world. I mean, I knew my child, I knew all of the people, but I remember I could think of something that I desired and it would show up. Okay? It was like manifestation on steroids. Okay? But I began to understand that process because I was led to read certain things. I began to study every religion because something had happened that I didn't understand. So I'm in search of what the hell happened to me.
did you talk to
Why?
anyone? Did you try to explain it to anyone?
There was no one around me at that time, and I knew instinctively, I knew they would not understand what was happening. My sister that I lived with, I talked to her, and she just kind of looked, yeah, but you've been really sick and blah blah blah, and she's kind of bringing herself back in because I come from a line of wisdom women. I call them wisdom women. They all had the sight. They all had this sixth sense, like my great great grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee. And then her daughter, she was a voodoo priestess. She used to do they all were from New Orleans, right? And she used to, do potions and stuff like that for people. But then her daughter and my mother and my aunt, they all kind of did it on the down low because they were in this church, right? So that didn't match. So they knew, but they call it prophecy and stuff like that. So they played it down. They didn't play into it like my great grandmother did. So
Because
I
it wasn't
always had
safe
that.
back then. I mean, you could just get burnt or killed or
Right. It wasn't
jail
really safe.
somewhere back then. Yeah.
But my sister, the one that I live with, she had that gift too. And it was very prominent in her. And I think that's why she was um, living the life with me that she was living, because she was running away from it. Right. So I didn't really have anybody to talk to, but I had books. I would walk in bookstores and books would fall off the shelf in front of me, which would tell me I needed to read this. When I finally went back to work, I remember I went back to work in the Los Angeles assessor's office. And I will never forget this woman. Her name was Lee. And she had a friend that worked in that whole section. And one day, this woman, she walks up to me with a paper bag. She said, "I was told to give you this book." And it was in a paper bag, it didn't have a cover. She said, "You'll understand." And so I took the book and I went and read it. And the name of the book is called Three Magic Words by U.S. Anderson. An amazing book, an amazing book. The three magic words, you don't get to the three magic words till the end of the book, right? And I'm going to tell you what the three magic word was, but you'll understand it anyway. The three magic words are, you are God.
I knew it. I knew you're going to say that.
Okay. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God. I trying to absorb that. And I was like, because I'm still living in this crazy world.
Uh-huh.
And then I'm reading these words and I'm like, okay, let me breathe, let me breathe. But my life after that changed so dramatically, right?
Wait. Let me just stop you for a second. Because you read that and you know it's true. This
I
is
knew
why,
it. I
right?
knew it.
Right?
But how do you explain that to the rest of the world and the people that you're around? And everything that my memory told me was saying that's blasphemy. Everything in my environment is saying that's blasphemy. But yet in my heart, in my spirit, I knew this is real.
Because if you're not there, uh, in your mind, in your soul's, advancement, whatever you want to call it, enlightenment, then you read it and you say, that's not true. That's BS. What is this thing,
But I
right?
knew,
But and this is why it
I knew,
changes you.
I knew.
That confirmation.
I didn't have all the pieces that got me there, but I
Uh-huh.
knew. Because I had begun to study all the religions, Buddhism, Islam, all of them. I began to study them to try to understand what had happened. And I knew I don't belong in any of that. This is a man-made thing for control. And I saw that. I'm 23, 24 years old. I saw this is bullshit. Excuse my expression. But this is how they have controlled us. It sounds good. Some of it is beautiful. Some of it is pretty. And I hadn't found Sufism or Sikhism. I hadn't got to that yet, because those are higher levels of Islam and of Hindu. Yeah, it's a different sect off of Hindu. But I studied all of that stuff, and none of it gave me answers. And life goes on, so I'm going through. I got married, had another kid, and I'm going through life, and
So wait a second. Back up just a little bit. So when you leave the hospital and there's nothing, there's no poison within you, that was it. Now you're good. There's no explanation, and everybody just
Nothing.
accepts
I
it.
don't have nothing. This is what I'm telling you. I have nothing.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, there were a lot of memory. Let me tell you, memories came up from when I was a child. I had been sexually abused and I didn't remember. But let me tell you, it's like when I realized it, I was like, oh my God, this happened. This is why I have a relationship with men the way I have. It began to all make sense. And I knew who the people were that did it, but I wasn't angry. I forgave them. And I'm like, what? I didn't understand. I don't, I can't even explain the way it was happening because all this stuff was happening and my reactions were totally opposites from what they should have been based on our society. I should have been pissed, right? But I wasn't. And I didn't know why I wasn't. Do you understand?
Yeah.
It was like I'm looking at this, oh, wow, this happened to me? Whoa, what? Whoa, okay.
I'm getting chills because I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
It's, yeah.
I know people that have experienced that as a child and they're messed up for life.
Yep.
They can't get past it.
Mm-mm.
I have clients that I have to work through this with. I didn't have that experience. And it was three different people that did this to me. And I could look at them and feel compassion. I'm like, okay, this isn't normal, right? But I kept searching. Even though life was happening, I got married, I'm back at work, I have another kid. I moved from LA to Seattle, and I'm still searching and I'm still reading. I'm still in that vein of searching. I run into this author named Ruth Montgomery. She had written a series of books. And I start reading. And it wasn't the first one that I read. And I can't even remember the name of the book, but it was one of her books where she started to talk about walk-ins. And when I read it, I knew. Oh my, but I'm getting chills right now because I started to cry. I was crying and it made sense. I knew that's what had happened. I was like, nobody could tell me that. But when I saw it, when I read it, I understood it, and I knew there was an exchange. The night that I didn't remember anything, there was an exchange. And I was like, oh my God.
So for the audience and those people who don't know what a walking is, even though you just painted the beautiful story to get there, can
Yes.
you tell us what is a walking?
A walk-in is a highly evolved spirit that will step in when the soul decides that it no longer wants to be on this level. So another soul will say, I will walk in and complete the mission. It may sound strange, but when you really understand how we as gods work, it'll make sense to you. It made so much sense to me. And some of them will play out what we call the karma, but it's not karma. It's things that that first soul had committed to. It will play it out and then it will take on its mission. And that's what was happening to me. So I was living out the commitments of the first soul, but through the higher soul that has stepped in, the
The
more
one that's
developed
all
soul.
loving,
Yeah.
accepting, can
Yes.
forgive.
Yes. 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 And there were still some rough edges, that I think I had to learn and look at and understand because I was still in this world. and I hadn't stepped into what my commitment was. I didn't even know until I went through two more of these experiences. I didn't even know what I was truly committed to, but I got the call. I think I was in my 50s. I met a man. He owned a gym. And this was right after the third near-death experience when they told me.
You're skipping over two near-death experiences.
Right, skipping over one. I'm
Okay.
skipping over one. One was at 30, right?
Uh-huh.
And that one was so weird. I knew, and this is what's interesting, there was always, it always was a choice. I had to choose. Every time I went to death's door, I always had to choose. And I don't believe in death, but I want to say that exchange place. It was always a choice. At 30, when I had that experience, I hemorrhaged to death from a miscarriage. My placenta had broken apart and covered the opening so the fetus couldn't pass.
Mm.
And by the time they got me into the examining room, I mean, just blood went everywhere. I had been hemorrhaging for a while. And when they got me in the operating room, and that was where I know that whomever that was, it wasn't from this dimension. That person that came in and said, you have to choose. It was I thought it was a doctor, but then I realized that I wasn't even on this plane anymore.
Huh?
Um, because the being stood, only his head was above her head. It was a female. Her head was above the gurney.
Mm.
And she walks up to me and in my ear, she didn't even say it out loud. And I didn't see anyone else in this scenario. She walks up and she says, you have to choose. I can't save you both. And I said to her, I have two other children and I can have more. So I have to stay. She went, her arm up to here, went inside of me and removed that fetus. When I came back to consciousness, I was in the upper room and everything was normal again. Okay? And they had me hooked up. They was giving me 2 or 3 pints of blood. They were like, we got to replenish the blood. You lost so much blood. I knew then when I came out of that, I was like, okay. And let me just back up a little bit. Because before I got there, I'm coming from Seattle to Los Angeles because my grandmother had transitioned. And I'm hemorrhaging on the plane. And I'm telling you, I have a bath towel that I have folded small enough to fit between my legs. And I had hemorrhaged so bad, it came all the way through all of that. And I remember getting up, changing, because one of the conductors had came and said, you don't look well. Let me take the children to the game room so you could rest. So I got up and changed and put another one. And I said a prayer. I said, hold my sun and stay my moon and allow me to make that journey. And the bleeding stopped. I didn't drop another drop of blood until I got into LA Union Station. How I knew to pray that prayer and the intensity of that prayer to stop time, that I could make that journey. Who am I? Okay. That's what I'm thinking. Who are you? But I knew there were things happening along that journey that weren't what we would call normal. I shouldn't have made it through that the way I was bleeding, but there was not another drop for 20 something hours. Okay. Okay. So I
So
want
let me just ask you one other little question. Did you have like a life review?
No, not then. No, I did not have a life review. I didn't lose. The only time in that process that I knew I was not here was when that being showed up. And I'm going to tell you, I knew I was somewhere else because there was no one else in that operating room but her. There was no lights, there was no noise, there was nothing but me and her. Okay?
Do you know
So
who
I
that
knew.
being was or where it came from?
See, you're making me come out. You're outing me. You're outing me. I
You don't
love
need
it.
to stop.
I love it. I believe it was a higher being. At first, I thought. Let me tell you this. At first, I thought it was a higher being, maybe from the Palladian system,
Mhm.
but I didn't settle on that, and the Arcturian was the other. I didn't settle on that because I wasn't sure. And I'll tell you in a minute why I knew it wasn't a Palladian. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So I know it was an Arcturian. And you knew it too when I told you earlier. You was
Uh-huh.
like, that's what it was, right? So, but I'll tell you why it wasn't a Palladian later on. So anyway, got to that again, going back through life, I I could and what was really crazy, the way I saw life, the way I moved through the world, I'm thinking everybody could do this. I'm thinking everybody was, and I remember just before I had the last one, I remember thinking, everybody don't see the world the way I'm seeing it. Everybody can't do what I'm doing. I mean, if I wanted to create something, I did it. You know what I'm saying? They used to call me the kingmaker in Seattle because I was working in the political system, I was working corporate and stuff and nonprofits. And whatever I put my hand to, it just happened. I took on this nonprofit. It was called Girls Inc. They were $22,000 in the hole. The IRS was coming to put locks on it. I said, not so. And don't ask me how I did it. I
Uh-huh.
just did it. I knew it wasn't going to be, right? Somehow, somebody sent a lawyer to me. She was a tax lawyer. She somehow wiped out that tax deck. I put together a whole board, the whole thing. And once I got it back stable, then I put it under the YWCA as one of their programs, saved the whole thing. I don't even know how I did it. First Black mayor of Seattle. His wife comes to me. We're friends, right? Good friends. My husband wants to run for mayor. I said, oh, that's great. He wants me to run a campaign. Wonderful. But I'm not going to do it if you don't do it with me. And I'm like, why is this woman staking her husband's future on me? I said, okay, I'll work with you. Of course, we made it happen. And then um, it was really funny because people, I knew they saw me in a certain way, but they didn't understand who and how I did things. So then they came to me and said, okay, we want to do the inauguration, and we want you to chair the inauguration committee. I said, okay, here's my idea. And I told us we're going to do a party for all the people. So we'll have a party for free, where anybody that want to come, they can come for free. Then we'll have one for the working class, $25. And then we'll have one for the upper class, $250 a ticket. So I threw all these parties. They just said, here, if you need anything, ask this person, ask it. All this happened, right? I worked on so many different campaigns, and people say, if you want to win, get Esther. She's going to do it. And I'm thinking, why am I and they can't see
Uh-huh.
the way I see things, right? And that's when I realized that they couldn't see the world the way I saw it. And I didn't fully understand because it was so natural to me.
Yes, and that's the point. I'm so glad you're bringing this up, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but like anyone who's awakening or who's, you know, thinks or feels that there's something different about them, that's it. We're like, it's so natural to us that we think it's nothing. We think it's normal, and we think that it's not
Yeah.
special,
No.
right?
Yeah. I mean, and there are those that will look at you and want to condemn you. And I had that. I had both sides, you know, or they try to set traps for you, you know, just different things, right? It's just it was a very, but what it made me realize is that everybody don't see what you see, and they don't do it the way you do it because they don't understand that. And the last one I had, I was working on a project that there was a lot of resistance in the company I was working with. And I remember the director, he said to me, I there's only one color I care about, and that's green. He said, and the idea you have, I like. Go do it, right? Well, I had to fight every other department because they didn't understand where did she come from? She ain't nobody. Where she came from, and she gonna do this, right? But I did it. I made it happen. But it cost me physically because I was not only putting energy to the project I was doing, but energy was going out to fight off all of the opposition.
Mm.
And my body broke down. My gallbladder went out. So they take my gallbladder out, right? Send me home, and they took it out. Um, um, this was a new procedure that they were using. They call it laparoscopic, where they didn't cut you open. They used little holes, and they, you know.
Mhm.
So I'm on that. I'm on the cutting edge of that. They send me home. You should be back up and at work in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I go in for my checkup. I tell the doctor, I am so tired. I don't have any energy. You know, he said, oh, don't worry, it'll be better. 2 weeks later, I wake up one morning, I can't breathe. I can't stand to be touched. I'm just like, this is the way I'm breathing. I called the surgeon. You know what he told me? Call your regular doctor. See, he didn't got his money. He done. Call your regular doctor. I called my regular doctor and I explained to him what's happening. He said, get to the hospital. I'll meet you there. I get to the hospital and they're trying to examine me, and just this touch was just, you know, we have to touch. I said, no, but it hurts so bad. It hurts so bad. So they took x-rays and all that stuff, and they still, again, I don't know why I have these things that people can't figure out. They can't figure out what's wrong with me. Okay. So it's the strangest thing.
Like, why can't they
So
figure it out? I know what's wrong with me
wait,
or not.
so I tell them, you know, I had the surgery, blah, 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 blah. They take x-ray, they said, oh, the whole the bottom half of your right lung, we don't see it, it's gone. I'm like, what the hell you mean it's gone? Well, either you have a bad case of pneumonia or something, right? We're gonna send you up to nuclear medicine. So they send me up to nuclear medicine, and they still ain't figured it out. So they got me on antibiotics. They put me on blood thinners. Every hole in my body has something. They had me on oxygen. I couldn't lay down. I could only sit up. You know, they had pillows behind me. So the doctor comes in, and I'm laying up here again for days. For days. I'm out of the body now. I'm like, screw this. There's too much pain. Because they put me on morphine, and the morphine did nothing for the pain. They had to change me to this other drug, Demerol or something else. I remember these drugs because they were switching these drugs trying to get the pain, but I couldn't stand it by. And I remember looking at myself in the bed. I'm above, looking down at myself. And they had me in this room, the small room. And I mean, all these people from my work came in, and they started praying because they were leaving. And I could see them, but they were white balls of light all around me, right? And I'm like, wow, what is this? So what I was seeing was their souls, right? And I kept saying, I'm not going back. I'm good. I can leave. I can again, I'm out of here, right? Boy said, no, you don't get to leave. You have to go back.